Ambassador stood alone in the center of the Galactic Council chamber. The massive hall stretched upward for hundreds of meters, filled with floating platforms where representatives from over 300 species watched her with various expressions of boredom, amusement, and open hostility. She had been speaking for nearly an hour, but no one was listening. The delegate, a massive reptilian creature covered in dark green scales, yawned loudly and deliberately. His sharp teeth gleamed under the chamber lights as he turned to whisper something to his neighbor. Laughter rippled through the nearby platforms, kept her face neutral, but inside she burned with frustration. Humanity had discovered faster-than-light travel only 40 years ago. In galactic terms, they were newborns taking their first steps into a universe that had been walking for millions of years. The older species saw them as insects, amusing little creatures that would either serve their betters or be crushed underfoot. Nobody took their requests seriously. "The Empire continues to harvest resources from the system," said, her voice carrying through the translation systems. "That system was granted to humanity by the Expansion Accords. We ask the Council to enforce the agreement and remove mining operations from our territory." High Chancellor, a tall being with pale blue skin and 4 arms, barely glanced at his data pad before responding. "The Empire has been a respected council member for 12,000 years. They claim the system contains resources vital to their war effort against the Nexus Collective. Your species has done nothing to develop these resources. The Council sees no reason to interfere." Felt her jaw tighten. "With respect, High Chancellor, we have submitted development plans for the system 3 times. Each time, the Council delayed approval for years. How can we develop resources when we are not permitted to begin work?" Another delegate spoke up, a floating sphere of energy that represented the consciousness. "Perhaps the young species should focus on matters within their capability. Mining operations require technology and expertise that humans clearly lack. They are doing you a favor by extracting these resources." More laughter echoed through the chamber. Felt the heat rising in her chest, but she controlled herself. She had one more card to play, though she knew it would likely be ignored like everything else. "We request formal peace negotiations between humanity and the Empire," she said. "Direct talks to resolve this territorial dispute without further escalation." Silence fell over the chamber, not the silence of consideration, but the silence of disbelief. Then the delegate burst into harsh, barking laughter that seemed to shake the walls. "Peace talks," he roared. "You want peace talks with the little human the Empire has conquered over 800 worlds. They have warships that could turn your entire planet into glass. Why would they waste time talking to you?" The representative himself finally spoke. Ambassador was a humanoid figure wrapped in ceremonial armor that hummed with energy shields, his silver eyes fixed on with cold amusement. "The speaks truth," said. "The Empire does not negotiate with species that have nothing to offer. You have no fleet worthy of mention, no weapons that concern us, no territory we cannot simply take whenever we choose. What exactly do you bring to a negotiation table, human?" Met his gaze without flinching. "We bring ourselves. We bring our desire for peaceful coexistence. We bring the hope that civilized species can resolve disputes without bloodshed." The laughter that followed was the loudest yet. Even High Chancellor allowed himself a small smile, though he tried to hide it behind one of his 4 hands. "Your request for peace talks is noted," said, clearly dismissing her. "The Council will consider it. You may step down, Ambassador." Stood her ground for another moment, then bowed slightly and walked toward the exit platform. Behind her, she could hear the delegates already moving on to other business, her concerns forgotten before she even left the chamber. Outside the council building, found General waiting for her. The old soldier stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the alien sky with an expression that revealed nothing. Beside him, Admiral checked messages on her personal device, her dark face tight with barely controlled anger. "They laughed at us again," said, though they had certainly been monitoring the session. "They did," agreed. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. "They have been laughing at us for 40 years. Looked up from her device. "The President has authorized Phase 2. The fleet is in position." Felt her stomach clench. She had known this moment was coming, had helped plan for it, but part of her had hoped it would never be necessary. Part of her had believed that diplomacy could work, that reasonable beings would eventually see reason. "How long until they arrive?" she asked. "The first wave will exit hyperspace in approximately 3 hours," replied. "The main fleet follows 6 hours after that." Finally turned to look at. His eyes were old, tired, but hard as steel. "Humanity tried peace, Ambassador. For 40 years we asked nicely. We followed their rules, we submitted to their procedures. We endured their insults and their mockery. We watched them steal from us, ignore our treaties, and treat us like animals." He paused, looking back up at the alien sky. "Now we will show them what they have been ignoring. Now we will show them why they should have listened." 3 hours later, Ambassador was in his private quarters reviewing reports on mining operations when his communications officer burst through the door without announcement. The officer's silver face was pale, his eyes wide with something had never seen in a before: fear. "Ambassador, you must come to the observation deck immediately. Something is happening, something impossible." Followed irritation mixing with curiosity. What could possibly cause such panic in a trained officer? When he reached the observation deck, he understood. The space around the council station had been empty that morning, protected by the neutrality agreements that kept military vessels away from the political center of the galaxy. Now that space was filled with ships, human ships, thousands of them, arranged in precise formations that stretched across the visible sky like an iron wall. But it was not the numbers that made blood run cold. It was the size. The largest dreadnought was 3 kilometers long, a massive instrument of destruction that had broken the backs of a dozen rebellions. The smallest of the human vessels hovering above the station was easily twice that size, and they were not the largest. At the center of the formation floated a ship that comprehension. It was dark, nearly invisible against the void, but its outline blocked out stars behind it. Implants calculated its dimensions and then recalculated, certain there had been an error. 27 kilometers. The ship was 27 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that his tactical systems could not even identify. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Humans have been spacefaring for only 40 years. They cannot have built this. This is a trick, an illusion." His officer shook his head, still trembling. "We have confirmed sensor readings from 16 different sources. These are real ships, Ambassador, real weapons, and they are all pointed at us." Throughout the council station, similar scenes were playing out. The delegate stared at the display in his quarters, his earlier mockery forgotten. His species had conquered their way across 100 star systems, building a reputation as fierce warriors. Their entire combined fleet was smaller than what the humans had brought to a single station. High Chancellor stood in the council chamber, surrounded by panicking delegates. His 4 hands worked frantically at communication systems, trying to understand what was happening, how this could be possible. "Get me the human ambassador," he ordered, "now." When walked back into the council chamber an hour later, the atmosphere had changed completely. The floating platforms that had been filled with amused, dismissive delegates were now occupied by terrified beings who watched her with new eyes. She walked to the same spot where she had stood that morning, ignored and mocked. "High Chancellor," she said, her voice pleasant and professional. "Thank you for seeing me again so quickly." Struggled to control his voice. "Ambassador, what is the meaning of this display? The neutrality agreements forbid military vessels near Council space. The Galactic Council voided its agreements with humanity when it refused to enforce our territorial rights. replied. Under the provisions of the Mutual Defense Clause, which I am certain your legal experts are currently reviewing, a species whose treaties have been violated may take measures to ensure its own security. But these ships gestured helplessly at the displays showing the massive fleet. Where did they come from? Our intelligence services reported that humanity had only a small defensive fleet. Smiled slightly. Your intelligence services saw what we wanted them to see. Humanity learned long ago that the galaxy respects only strength. We spent 40 years building that strength in secret, hidden in asteroid fields and dead systems where no one bothered to look for us. We developed technologies your species had abandoned or never imagined. We prepared. Ambassador pushed forward, his earlier arrogance gone. You have violated a dozen council regulations. You have threatened peaceful species with military force. This will not stand. We have threatened no one, said calmly. Our weapons are powered down. Our ships maintain defensive positions only. We have come here not to attack but to deliver a message. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates who had laughed at her hours before. Humanity desires peace. We have always desired peace. We came to this council 40 years ago hoping to join a community of civilized species, to share knowledge and culture, to grow together. Instead, we found bullies and thieves who saw our peaceful nature as weakness. Her voice hardened. We are not weak. We were patient. There is a difference. And now that you understand what we are capable of, perhaps you will be willing to discuss terms like civilized beings. She turned to, I am formally requesting peace negotiations with the Empire regarding territorial disputes in the system. I am also requesting a full review of all treaties between humanity and council species, with proper enforcement mechanisms. And I am requesting that humanity be granted a permanent seat on the High Council, with full voting rights. The chamber was absolutely silent. Looked at the other delegates, at the displays still showing thousands of human warships, at the 27-kilometer monster hanging in space like a sword over their heads. The council agrees to all requests, he said finally. Negotiations will begin immediately. Nodded politely. Thank you, High Chancellor. I knew the council would see reason eventually. As she turned to leave, the delegate called out, his voice stripped of its earlier mockery. Ambassador, one question. Why, if you had this power all along, why endure 40 years of insults? Why wait until now? Paused at the door and looked back at him. Because we wanted to be absolutely certain that we had given peace every possible chance. We wanted to know without any doubt that we had tried everything else first. Now we know. Now we can move forward with clear consciences. She walked out of the chamber, leaving 300 species to contemplate what they had awakened by ignoring humanity's outstretched hand. Within a week, the peace treaties were signed. The mining operations from the system. Humanity took its seat on the High Council. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Peace is not weakness, and patience is not surrender. Sometimes the quietest voice in the room belongs to the one carrying the biggest weapon. And humanity, finally treated as equals, proved to be exactly what they had always claimed. Good neighbors, fair traders, and loyal allies. But no one ever forgot those ships hanging in the darkness, and no one ever laughed at a human ambassador again.